What's up, Kingdom of Rock? This is Matt Gibson, and we're having another exciting live stream episode right here on Everywhere. How's it going, Mike?
It's good.
How's sunny San Francisco going?
It's dark, man. I hate daylight savings times or whatever it is. I hate it. I hate it, hate it, hate it. I don't want it to be dark right now. But always awesome. It's awesome with. Well, I'll shut up so you can introduce our guests. Or else I'll introduce them. So you just go.
How about you introduce one and I'll introduce the other? We'll make it.
No, I don't know. I think you just need to do it.
Okay. Well, obviously we have another person on this side of the country, right down here below, Mr. George Pajon, Jr.
I'm in Vegas.
Yeah, in Vegas, where I'm at, the best place. No, I'm just kidding.
What?
But we had a very special guest decide to stay up late, and on his side of the country, and Mr. Billy Sheehan, legendary bass player, one of my favorite rock bass players of all times.
Very kind of you.
Very
everybody's favorite rock bass player.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge to stop Matt from inviting him to every episode of the Kingdom of Rock.
Well, funny you say that, because Billy was one of the first guests that I had when I started the podcast. So before we had a live stream. So thank you very much for doing that. I guarantee you that helped me get other guests. So I appreciate you.
Glad to hear that.
Get me started.
Wonderful. That's great.
You're like one of the nicest guys out there, Billy. It's like you're always willing to help everybody. It's like you're just out there. Just sure, I'll be on your show.
Wait till my dark side comes out. You'll.
Yeah. Well, let's try. Maybe not tonight would be good.
You're right about that.
And George, I can't believe that all the time I spent at Guitar Player Magazine, I can't believe I never talked to you. It seems like
I can't believe that either.
I know. I apologize. I don't know what happened.
Dude, that's two in a row. Two undiscovered guitar players, so to speak. Undiscovered, right? Only the guitars for the Black Eyed Peas.
It's just we just didn't cover them.
Yeah.
Well, it's not your fault. It's actually music's fault. If you're not, what I was doing, what I still am doing, because I still tour with them, isn't something that is spoken about as far as guitar playing. But I literally played on every song, wrote a lot of the songs. I'm not a backup guy. I've been in the band for 23 years. Wow. The only guitar player that they've toured with. When I take breaks, some other people sit in for me, but I've always been the guy, and I'm playing my parts. And people used to ask me all the time, it's like, why don't they ever talk about, like, you did so many cross-genre things on those records? And I'm like, don't know.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, obviously, at any major media magazine, a publicist usually reaches out and says, "Oh, Billy's got a new record out, or Black Eyed Peas are coming out. Hey, we got George. Can you do something?" But it's kind of like it obviously didn't happen for you and for maybe a lot of other guitar players in that genre. Why do you think that is?
I think the focus is it's really simple. The focus is on the four people in the front, and that's it. It's even though I literally was in the studio for every song. I was literally there for everything, all the, my role in that band was, and still is, I stopped, well, he still does it, but I remember the first time I was in the studio with will.i.am, he would take me to, when there was music stores, record stores still around, he'd go and buy like $2,000 of CDs, and we'd come back and he'd put in a CD and go, click, 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 until he found a part that he liked. And I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, he's like, "I can play that." And he's like, "Oh, you know how to play stuff like this?" "Yeah, I grew up on rock." "Oh, cool. Play something like that." And so I would. And it stopped the sampling of him sampling, Zeppelin or the Stones, or I would just be like, why don't I write something in that vein? And that was my role in that band. And I literally would sit there and he'd be like, "You got something?" "Yep." And I played on everything. And it's still that way to today.
Is it difficult? because we have, well, I'm sure Billy's been challenged by the same thing, but is it difficult, like in a band like the Black Eyed Peas, where the songwriting is kind of linear and also not linear? Parts are flown out from all over the place. Is it difficult as a creator to go like, does he just want a part, or what's the feel I have to have for this, or what are the what's the lyrics going to be, or the vocals? I mean, do you get that, or do you have to come up with the part right then and there, or is it like all of the above?
I don't just come up with a part. I basically, my process with Will is he'll be creating a beat, I'll be in the background, and I'm writing parts as he goes. And so I have my own system where I'm creating different parts, and because he literally only gives me sometimes 30 seconds. He'll just be like, "You got something?" I said, "Yes." He presses record. If he captures it, it makes the song. If he doesn't capture it, it doesn't speak, it doesn't make the song. That's literally the time period that I get.
Wow.
It's been that way, and that's just his process, and you just have to be ready. And so I would come up with 5 to 10 parts before he even ever asked me, "Are you ready?" And then as I started noticing what he responds to, I would create parts that fit together. So when he liked the first part, I'd be like, "Hey, can you open up another track? Let me show you this." And then I would build that way. And that was my main voice in the band, is what I would layer and build big parts. And all were already written before he ever asked me anything. And I would write bridges, choruses. I would just create the song as he was creating the beat.
And
And
that
sometimes,
really. Go ahead, George.
sometimes it's hit and miss. I mean, so I missed on a lot of them, and I hit on obviously quite a few.
I was just going to say, George let me come into his studio and hang with him a couple months ago, and was playing me some of his tracks on his new band, which we'll talk about here in a second. But one thing about George that I really admired is he's kind of like a sound designer, like a snippet of effects, or he's like a snippet guitar player, although he can just shred and destroy the guitar anyway. But like, it seems like that affected your writing style, or the way that you approach creating parts. Is that?
It's 100% accurate. I call myself a soundscaper. I really create soundscapes. I start with a simple foundation, and you take it to places that keep the listener interested. We're dealing with now something that I didn't deal with 20 years ago. And that is that you have the attention span of all of 3 seconds. If you don't capture people, they press next. And so that is my main goal, is to keep the listener entertained for every, almost bar you have to. And so I create landscapes. I create things that are constantly moving and constantly evolving.
Something
and that's, go ahead.
Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is, it was the concept that I created my voice in my band, which is, it's only 2 people. So I'm sharing bass duties with the drummer who plays bass with his left hand when they're simple parts. And then on choruses, I'm playing through 5 amps, including a bass amp, and my signal is completely isolated. So the only way I could do that is my E string is a 72. So it's literally, you're basically playing a baritone, but I'm a whole step below a baritone. And so, yeah, go ahead.
So we should probably get to your band in a sec, but I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which involves obviously Billy as well, is that, if I'm talking to other guitar players back when I was editor guitar player, it's so funny because you know how musicians are. It's like, why aren't I a session dude? It's like, I can play shit that's crazy. I can wipe these other guys out. And the thing that they keep forgetting is, when you're talking about coming up with a part in 10 seconds with Will going move on, or Billy, the sessions that you've done where, maybe you don't know the song walking in, but you got to come up with like a kick-ass bass line within seconds. I mean, that's something a lot of musicians forget, that if you're going to be a session person or a part person or contribute to a songwriting session, you have to be fast and get it right. And Billy, do you have any wisdom about that? Is it just you're lucky the stuff pops into your head, or do you pull from a lot of your influences right away? And how fast are you able to actually translate that to your fingers?
Well, stuff that happens in the moment. As George said, you got a few, just like a listener, whoever you're working with, you can't sit there and fiddle around for half an hour till you get something. What are you going to do here? This. Oh, okay, that's good. And I think for myself, it came from just decades of playing in bars, night after night after night, and now we sit down with a guitar and a couple of people. You can do 100, 120 songs, just singing and playing off the top of your head because you just remember them. And then all the things I've done on my own too, aside from copy bands. I'm sure George could say the same thing. That stuff becomes part of your DNA, and I'm lucky to have grown up and stood on the shoulders of a lot of amazing players. And taken everything from them I possibly could, and I'm happy to see young players taking it from me too, and that goes on generation to generation. But yeah, there's a million things that it's incredible. This adventure never stops. There's so much more that you can do.
I'm gonna take that a step further. Let me show you something real quick.
Okay.
So it's also called preparation. I'm a complete nerd when it comes to what I call tone searching. So to write the record, I wrote 20 songs for the 2 new Cairo Night Fight records during the pandemic. So how I start that process is I will literally build pedal boards with Friedman, because Friedman's built all my pedal boards, and my concept for Cairo Night Fight, he built all that stuff and all the wiring and everything. I'll turn on a Pro Tools file, open the session, and I'll sit there and go through every single preset, and I make notes of everything that it speaks to me. And it's literally stuff like great filter delay with amp 3, great for looping apart. And so when I'm searching for another section, I go back to that stuff, and that's for every single pedal. So I'll sit in my studio for hundreds of hours so that session that I told you that I turn on and I scream into the mics, this would be great for a bridge. This would be great for this. That session now is at about 48 hours of continuous recording.
Wow.
And then I'll go back when I'm stuck on certain things, I go back and listen to it. And sometimes my partner will go into the studio when I was still living in Burbank. He'd walk in there at 4:00 in the morning and just listen to that stuff and be like, he'll make a mark and he's like, hey, I left you some notes. We should turn that into a song. And there's one of my favorite songs on these upcoming 2 records. It was literally 3 seconds. And I took that 3 seconds and turned it into a piece of music. But that created the inspiration.
Well, what was really cool when George was letting me listen to some of the record and everything. For Cairo Night Fight, he was he would get excited about just a little nuance. I could see it in his personality where he was emotionally connected to this little nuance in the song, where this sound that I don't even know how he made it. Sometimes just comes into the song at the right moment. It's really an interesting. It's made me rethink how I approach songwriting for sure. Just that one listening session at George's house. So
thank you,
Billy. I was going to ask you, do you find you were in a very popular band? Obviously, all your bands are popular, but as far as pop, almost Mr. Big, right? You guys had some pop hits. What did you find that you had to adjust your wants to fit into that container, as an artist?
No, because I love a lot of pop music too. I love it came up at a time when radio played everything. It wasn't these balkanized walls between genres. There was everything, and so there was probably something from almost every genre in the world that I like, except for opera or Dixieland jazz. I think those are two I don't get along with for some reason, but almost anything else. I love a great pop song, and we always, snuck in elements of, a little heaviness or a couple of cool licks or something. But for us in that band, it was really our biggest concern was vocals. The bass and guitar histrionics or nonsense. That was fun. We had a good time with that, but we kept trying to illustrate that to a lot of musicians that just would focus on the pyrotechnics. So we had one encore or one song we did in our set on a tour just a few years ago was a song called "It's for You" by Three Dog Night, which was a Lennon McCartney song that they covered, and it's got this staggered harmony vocal thing that I remember back in the day. Any band that could do that song was considered a singing band. So we did it on purpose just to try to make our point there. But I love pop music. I love all kinds of stuff. My wife listens to a lot of even the EDM. I love a lot of EDM stuff. "Smack My Bitch Up" by Prodigy was one of my favorite songs ever.
I watched them do that live many times.
Great.
It is kind of interesting. I hate to say a certain age, but as a certain age, like growing up in San Francisco, we had KSAN and the kind of underground, not really underground, but just crazy pirate radio stations that would play everything from Zappa to the Beatles to whatever. And growing up with that kind of diversity beaming into your system all the time, it's like you said, Billy, it's kind of like you just don't think of it possibly as pop or this or that. It's just all this stuff that you've collected. Today, sometimes, not to be like the cranky old man, but some of the musicians that I deal with in my journalism career, it's funny how little they'll know about anything outside their comfort zone. And it's a little bit depressing, really, because as you said, you've been able to play everything. George is collecting voluminous notes on stuff that affects him for his songs, and I'm sure a lot of that is based on a lot of what you've listened to throughout your life, George. So
absolutely,
it's I hope we're not getting to a point where it's just everybody's so segmented off that we lose all that diversity.
Yeah, I got an iTunes collection that's well over 2 terabytes right now, and I've got everything you could imagine in there, from Bulgarian choirs to a lot of world music, Indian music, Pakistani music, a lot of African stuff, all from all over the world, and then a huge amount of 60s garage rock, massive amounts of it. And most every bass player's bass is out of tune on almost all those things. Real beauty in that. Yeah, but it's great. We sit down, have a couple friends over, and have a couple glasses of wine, and start scrolling through stuff. Man, I go, did you ever hear of a band called, here's a band called The Flock? Jerry Goodman on violin. Check it out. And wow, they never knew of it before. I remember playing the first Chicago record for my wife. She's Italian. And she loved it. She said, I don't know why I'd never heard of this before. She was never exposed to it. Another great band, another great record. So I love that diversity, but not everyone does. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I always the question I get asked a lot is, wait, you play in that heavy band, but you're in the Black Eyed Peas. I was like, man, it's the same 12 notes. It's all art. It's all art. And some of it I love, some of it I don't. I mean, look, there's certain Black Eyed Peas songs I can't stand playing, but it's still art. It's his art. That's Will's brainchild, and all I do is try to compliment it. And in my band, that's where my brain lives, but it's still the same, man. It's just playing guitar and playing music, and I still love it, and I love it playing in the pop band or playing in my band.
Have you ever got in trouble for ripping a guitar solo where you weren't supposed to?
I just did it in Egypt, and I misunderstood Will. He was trying to say to me, make it loud. So I was like, oh, you're talking to the right person for that. Started. He's like, no, make it loud in here. He wanted me to start the pump it riff. And then people go crazy. I'm going like this, and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I thought you wanted me to rip right now.
That's always
So,
what a guitar player thinks you mean, right?
You know, most guitar players, you know, I want to tell this story because it really affected my life and how I approached my instrument for the rest of my life. When I was working with the very first producer I was working with, I would be sitting in the back of the room reading Guitar Player magazine. And then he'd turn around and he's like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, I want to be the best I can be. He's like, why? He's like, why aren't you reading about Pro Tools and councils and effect processors? Or why aren't you learning how to be a better writer? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, let me explain something to you. And he calls up at the time, Eric Clapton's MD. I can't think of his name. Greg Fillingates.
Oh yeah.
He calls up Greg and he's like, hey, Greg, if you don't mind me asking, how much money do you make a week with Eric? And he's like, oh, he said the number. And then he's like, all right, thanks. Hangs up and he turns to me. He's like, you know how much I'm making to produce this 30-second bumper? 5 times that. So you still want to read your magazine? There's a certain level that you get to when you're a touring musician that if that's all that you strive for, it's very limiting. It's like, why not create the music, write the music, and be more of a key person than just a fast player or a shredder? Like, go only takes you so far. And listen, we're in a very new and exciting age of internet music that there are some pretty crazy players that are young, and I'm like, whoa, how you get that good that fast? But has he written an album? Has he written a song?
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what Billy was saying about, Mr. Big, the focus being on vocals. I mean, obviously I had to deal with this every day at Guitar Player, like you were saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And we tried to tell people, no, you got to learn to write a song, because, and how you'd really start a bar fight is like you say, if Hendrix wasn't on AM radio, we probably wouldn't know who the hell he was today. There's you have to have something that people want to hear. You can't just be, you can't be a wizard if you're a wizard in a cave or on top of a mountain.
Hell, Hendrix left America because America didn't understand him.
Yeah.
And went to Europe and came back, had to come back here. I mean, you have to find your niche and find your voice. And that's the key, is having a voice. If you don't have a voice, then you're just another fish in the pond. You have to have a voice.
Yeah, it's kind of concerning to me. I see amazing players online. Unbelievable. I'm inspired. But I just want to say to them, and I said, all my advice I give the young players is the 3 things you got to do. Get in a band. Get in a band with songs. Get in a band with songs that you sing. And look at run the numbers of everybody that has been a success, and you'll find that that's the dominant factor almost everywhere.
Completely.
Yeah, well, sometimes, people forget, getting in a band and being able to actually perform too. And Billy, that's one of the things that's been so great about this, despite your, amazing technical ability and all that, you know how to put it out there to the back of the hall, so to speak. And it seems very genuine. It's not like you're doing a Broadway show or something. But I think sometimes with, this whole thing about creating in your house, you kind of lose that training that you have to affect people and pull them in. And it's not just standing up there, buzzing past them at 40,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, and one thing that irks me about that is people start talking about, well, you got to make a face. when you're playing. I go, no. When somebody tells you a joke, in your mind you think, how shall I laugh at that joke? Should I go he, ha ha ha, or ho ho ho? Whatever happens on your face, you got no control over. And I never make a face. Faces happen. But it's so convoluted and backwards now that I think, oh, well, this note here is some mean note, so I got to look mean. No. It's backwards. It's like people saying they're endorsed by an instrument company. No, you endorse them. They don't endorse you.
Dude,
yeah,
you changed my life with telling me that on the interview when you were on the show, because I had just gotten ESP endorsement, and I was talking about that I was endorsed by ESP, and you're like, no, don't ever say that. You're the reason that they're selling guitars, not the other way around.
Yeah,
you know. But you kind of, as a new guy, you kind of feel validated, you know, like.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like, I got the stamp of like coolness or whatever, you know. But you're right, man. If you got to go in there like a marketing pro, be like, I know what my value is, and
you know, it's funny. I have different relationships with companies than that. When they approach me, every company has approached me to like, hey, would you be interested in playing our guitar, or you know, pedals? I'm like, well, I'm interested in actually taking it a step further. What about I own your guitar already, I own your pedal already, but what if we did this and this and that, and we start that conversation and it creates something?
Yeah.
And because to me, that those people created that, they have their own art form and they're creating their art, and I want to enhance that somehow in the way I use it and play it. So I have a great love affair with all the companies that I work with, and you know, I'm very lucky that I've known Dave Friedman for over 30 years, and so he's always been my springboard where I'm like, hey, I want to try to do this. That's not possible, but let me think about it, and I'll scheme something up for you. Come to my shop. And that's literally how everything that I do in Cairo came from. It's just me having a thought. I remember when I built this pedal board that everyone talks about, because it's this crazy pedal board that speaks to it all speaks together, including with the amps and everything. And it all came from, I was in Denver with my wife's family for Christmas, and I got it on the computer and actually mapped it all out. And then when I got back to LA, I took it to Friedman, and he's like, you did all this? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I'm gonna start hiring to map everything that I have to do, because it takes me forever. I was like, man, you think so far ahead. But that's what irks me about today's musicians is, in order to me, everyone that's been successful has always been 10 years ahead of what they're doing right now. You got to think so far ahead of what you're doing this very second. You know, the rig rundown I did with Pete Thorne in Detroit, I get comments on that all the time, and I'm like, yeah, I'm 5 rigs ahead of that.
I've never seen a guitar rig that is more complicated than George's guitar rig. How many pedals do you have active at any given time, and amps at the same time in the studio?
Well,
like what's your biggest setup?
The biggest setup is the one I use all the time, and that's five guitar amps and a bass amp, 2 bass amps. So, and sounds excessive, but essentially, when I started working with Cairo, because Cairo Knife is a band that came from New Zealand, and they were doing the 2-man thing back then. And when Nick moved to Los Angeles and met me, I became a fan of the band, but I thought I can enhance what the original guitar player was doing. Because when you use a looper in front of the amp, you're getting rid of the most treasured thing for me, which is the relationship between just the guitar and the amp. That beautiful compression that happens from a tube amp. When a looper is hitting it constantly, nonstop, the same thing, you're missing that. So I went to Friedman and I was like, I don't like that. How can we do it? And he's like, why don't we do a stereo rig and you loop in the effects loop of the amps? And that way it's not getting rid of your compression, your top end, your low end. And it all started there. And then at that point, it was only 2 amps. But then when I would create this loop, I had nowhere else to go when I wanted to be more dynamic on stage. So I added a 3rd amp that was completely dry. Then I needed it to be a little bit bigger when I was doing, just chunky stuff. The best records in the world, how do they do that? A plexi turned all the way up, or an old, Mark 2C plus for the Metallica stuff. So I have an amp that's just for that. And it only turns on, literally only turns on when you need that punch, that bigness. And then most of the time it's only 2 amps on. But the best way to describe it, it's volume scaling. It's incredibly dynamic. So when the singer is singing, I filter those amps down almost 20 dB, and it goes down to a whisper. And then I have the ability to just hit one button, and I can be as dynamic as having 3 other guitar players in the band by just hit. Everything's instant. And that's thanks to Dave. It's literally completely volume scaling is what I call how I describe it. And I don't think I answered your question, Matt.
Well, no,
yeah,
go ahead.
Not a lot of pedals. What you saw in my studio is my studio rig. It's only two pedal boards that do the amp switching, and there's like maybe 5 or 6 pedals that are always in use, and that's mainly like the Strymon. I have all the Strymon stuff, and the reason I use the Strymon stuff is most people don't know the incredible amount of stuff you can do with MIDI on those pedals. Mm-hmm. I can hold a reverb, play on the other amps, that reverb's still going, hold the delay, modulate it, regenerate it forever, and still play on top of it and let it bleed over when you switch patches. It's amazing. It's what obviously you see. I get really excited about talking about this stuff. I'm a nerd, man. I'm a guitar nerd.
Billy, is there anything cool in the bass world as far as technology and new developments and stuff? What's out there that you're messing with lately?
Well, one thing that I've used since the 70s, really, Taurus pedals they play with your feet, that you play notes with your feet, so you can do extra notes while you're singing and playing. It adds an extra guy to the band, especially in a 3-piece band. But think of the 12-step is a little MIDI version of it, about this big. I'll get camera angle, about this thick, and you can program chords into it, voices, samples, anything you want. So that's become an essential component. The fourth guy in a three-piece band in a lot of ways, real helpful for that. I use Main Stage as my sounds, the Mellotrons and B3s, and Spectrasonics, Omnisphere for a lot of low-end things. Great programs, but so that's. But I don't go too far into the world of pedals, only because as a bass player, you need that low-end thing, and you don't want things interfering. And I did a pedal with EBS that splits my signal so that your low is unaffected. One side is clean and unaffected, and the other side, you can get your distortion on. That way, you never lose that actual bass. Because I always remember as an example on Dance to the Music by Sly and the Family Stone, when I'll go to that zone bottom, and then he plays, but it's because the low end is gone because you hit the distortion. So I've always and it's interesting to hear George using multiple amps too, because I've been doing that for quite a while, and it's really a great asset to have different sound sources. And for me too, I got a double output for my bass, so one pickup goes to one amp, one to another. So the low end is always there, and so I get away with a lot more nonsense because there's still low end going on. Where
so are you using it as George does, as kind of like volume scaling, or are you also using tone? I mean, how do you typically kind of cast all these amps when you're on stage?
One is a super deep low end, and one is the high end. You don't hear much of the the zing on the low amp, and you don't hear much of that on the high amp. So it's just kind of, it's actually split more by frequency. The high amp is usually cut off about 300 cycles, and the low amp is full range, but it doesn't actually do much high end. So, it's always. A lot of companies did it also. Rickenbacker had the Rico sound. To both pickups went to a stereo jack you could send to two different amps, and then all the early alembic instruments, the first really popular handmade instruments, they all had dual output too. Each pickup had its own output into a separate amp. So it's not a new idea, but
no,
it is supremely effective.
No, I mean, it's essentially what I'm doing is a wet dry rig, essentially.
Yeah, there you go.
And, and I mean, Eddie Van Halen did that for how many years?
Yeah,
a lot.
And By, same thing. I mean, it's if you never actually had a lot of time in the studio, then you don't know the difference. When you're in a studio and you actually get your guitar recorded correctly and they add effects post, it's the best sound ever. And essentially that's all I'm trying to create is that sound. I remember when I was the most shocking experience for me when I was riding with Carlos Santana. Of course, I was excited to see his rig set up. And so I'm in there, he's playing, and I'm like, man, there's the Carlos tone. I need to hear it in the room. I go in the room, dry. Completely dry. Not a single effect, no verb, no lushness, nothing. Dry and loud.
Was it at least a Mesa?
No, at this time he was using the Dumbles.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so all of that, and I asked him, I was like, so that is all coming post, right? And he's like, that guy I've been working with for 30 years, and you're not allowed, they lock the Pro Tools tracks. You're not allowed to adjust the settings. When you're working with him, those are locked. And I was fascinated. I was like, that's the way to do it. Because essentially you're getting the purest guitar tone, and then you add all the extra stuff later if needed. And that the most amazing guitar tone to me is still cable amp. That's it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of musicians, I would get a lot of mixing gigs during COVID, and with people that I thought should know better. And I mean, you'd get it with like horrendous amounts of reverb you can't take off. And then it would be like, well, why does it sound so mushy? And it's like, well, because you gave me one guitar that was bathed in 400 gallons of reverb. It's hilarious. And it's funny that some musicians don't wait for that stage to get the best tone as you can at the amp or whatever you're using, and then figure it out later when you're mixing. That's when you start doing all that creative stuff, typically about matching it to the tracks you have.
When I record, anytime I record, and it's a trick I learned from a great engineer when I was really young, and it's lost nowadays. Just send a direct signal. Just record a dry direct signal so you can reamp later. What if mistakes are made all the time in the studio? Your amps could be out of phase. Your amps could be broken, a broken speaker. How do you fix that if you don't have a direct recording of the signal? And it's also a great trick to add high end, low end later to an amp sound that isn't that good.
Hey, Billy, I want George again when talking about Carlos Santana's tech locking the signal so that the Carlos tone is the Carlos tone. When you do sessions, are you fairly precious about that? Do you say, "Here's my tone, don't mess with it. I'm not giving you, a direct signal so you can screw with it later. This is what you get. This is me."
Well, I try to bend with the changes and roll with the changes, or bend with the whatever. If they want a direct sound, oh man, I said, okay, you know what? That's what they want. Generally, if I'm doing a session for somebody else, I want them to be bass. So if they want the direct tone, it means I had to play a little more differently, create my own compression with my hands, and a few things, but I always try to advise them, if you just do this, check that out. If you don't like it, cool. And generally they go with what I like. But I've never been in a spot where I insisting that things be a particular way, probably to my own detriment. I mean, I've recorded bass a lot and pretty much know how to make it happen. So, but I try to, especially when I do a session for someone else, try to make it so they're pleased with it. And it's interesting. A couple of times that people have been around this dual amp thing that I do and all that, and then later on, I forgot what band it was. We opened for some huge band. I want to mention it because they got it, in case it might sound derogatory, it's not. And sure enough, the next tour I saw the bass player with the they had another amp distorted in an anvil case mic, get the distorted bass mixed in with the clean. So I'm glad to see sometimes people do take it as a cue of that it might be a possibility for something that might be useful. But I'm pretty cool with bending to the situation if I have to.
That's pretty odd because you think that if somebody wanted you, they want your sound. I mean, that's always was weirded me out. Whether you're a guitar player, a drummer, bass player, somebody will hire somebody and then it'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna decide what this person sounds like. It's like, well, why did you hire that person?
No, you should have hired the guy that sounds like that already.
Yeah.
Michael, what I do as well is I send. So we're in a stem world right now where people are sending stems back and forth. I do that where I bounce my tone the way I personally hear it. I send them the dry version. I send them the full session so they can have the freedom to do whatever they want. And I always say, hey man, I'm not married to any of those parts. It's just I gave you as much as I can do on this song, so that you can take things away. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Get rid of it if you don't like it. And
awesome.
Well,
I'll generally do like a second track. I'm recording tracks here in my house. We've done almost 300 tracks during the pandemic, and I don't know how many records. But I'll also let's run another track with my engineer, and I'll do a lot of nutty, crazy ass things. And tell the guy, cut and paste or mute it out, whatever you want, but at least that way you'll have some extra things to work with,
Billy, do you have a studio at your home?
Yeah, I'm in there now. I got a nice little pretty compact little Pro Tools rig on a Mac Mini, because I don't have to do drums or any multi-track instruments. So and therefore I don't have to buy $3,000 preamps to do that. So it helps out. I do vocals, guitars, and bass here. And I have a little production company with Ray Lugier, from drummer from Korn. He's got a really great setup in his house and he did have to buy all those preamps for his.
Yeah, so. I did too.
Did you did dealing with sessions during lockdown, did that affect your creative or bent in any way, or was it just I'm home, it's no different than being in a studio, or did you feel like you had to adapt yourself to being alone basically, or with a partner recording?
Well, I love it. And it's really, I've never really had studio chops per se, because I'm mostly a live player. So when I went in the studio, I do what I did live and maybe get lucky that it kind of worked on a record. So now there's some things I have to do that I got to really fit things in a different way. And some people are funny. It's hard to please them. And you do exactly what they said, and they said that's not what they meant. And you have to get creative and figure out what they're talking about. So I've enjoyed it immensely. It's been really cool. And all kinds of music too, from country, Ghost Riders in the Sky, or the theme from Bonanza, to electronic dance music, to kinds of esoteric, strange things, and from all over the world too, countries all over the place. But it's been cool. It's been a challenge, and I think it's helped me to understand a lot more about a lot of things.
Well, let me ask you this, Billy. When you were on the show the first time back, that was at 2015, I think, actually. You had mentioned that I was asking you, Billy, how do you make a living as a musician? You know, how do you become successful monetarily? Because I had a military career and I was trying to figure out how to, you know, be a professional musician. And you had explained the music industry like a hamburger stand. And you were explaining that, you know, your music career is like a hamburger stand. You want to make good hamburgers and, you know, but how has COVID affected your hamburger stand, so to speak?
Well, I just can't. I can't go out and perform live, and for me, that is, I live to play live, and I play live to live. That's my thing. I've never really been a studio guy, so. But this has enabled me, and I haven't advertised once or put out or solicited. But people just write me out of nowhere and say, "Hey, I got these songs. You want to play bass?" And we work out a deal, and we do it that way. And it hasn't been a negative, I don't think, but I do miss playing live. Live is in my hands in order to keep them in shape, because a week of practice is equal to about 10 minutes of playing live.
Yeah.
George, I'm sure you concur with me on that. And
100%.
And you have
found it to keep your hands in shape.
You have a kind of a soundproof area in your house too, right? Where you just crank up everything. Where
I don't play that loud. Even in we live in a really quiet neighborhood, and I had no idea my neighbors could hear me at all. I was like, "Oh, I heard you playing bass the other day," but it's as quiet as my voice speaking, you know. But and I generally never listen to a lot of loud playback, because I think you start to get an oddball EQ curve when you get things too loud. So it's never been I've never had to worry too much about being too loud. That's not been a problem so much.
How about you, George? What have you? What's changed as far as business goes for COVID, and what are you doing to adapt to that?
Everything's changed. It's completely different. I don't know how when people ask me for advice about starting a music career, I deter. It's like it's not the same anymore.
No.
If you're part of a legacy artist, is what they call the P's now. You will, if you have, look, I've always said this, that's why it goes back to the writing thing. If you have a #1 song, you'll be able to play forever. Forever. Yep. There are bands that are still doing it. I mean, hell, the Stones are just played in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. They're 80. You have a song, you can play it forever. But the returns are way different now. I'll just tell you straight facts of numbers. When the P's went to #1, we beat out Eminem by selling 1.6 million records, physical records. That does not exist anymore. You see all these, I got a #1 song. I'm like, I kind of irks me, because it's like, no, that's really not what that means. It's completely different. And you basically have to fund your own career now. There's no record deals that give you $1 million and they're going to sign you for 5 albums. That only happens if you already did the work. If you have 100 million streams, then that's why they're coming to you with money now, because you're already making their money. They're just trying to get the money from you. It's that simple. And so it's completely different. Honestly, for me personally, nothing has changed, because once again, I'm in a legacy situation where all the success was, 10, 20 years ago, and they're still successful now. The P's are huge still worldwide. Our last show was 100,000 people. So it hasn't changed for me very much. The difference is, like I said, you have to fund your own thing. When you want to do your own project, I'm paying for it out of my pocket. And so I call the P's my flipping burgers job. People are like, why are you still playing with the P's? It's like, well, that's what funds me being able to do my band. It pays for everything.
Which I don't know. I don't want to spill the beans or anything, George, so I won't go into things that we talked about unless you say it's okay. But can you say anything about recording the Cairo?
Absolutely.
Album?
Absolutely.
Tell them a little bit where that was done at and everything.
Yeah, and it actually goes back to a question that Michael asked Billy is, when the only thing that stopped me from doing Cairo Knife Fight would be the Black Eyed Peas. So we would be in the studio writing, and I'd have to tell my partner Nick, hey, I got to go on the road for 3 weeks. So that
And
would stop
it's
the
two
creative.
people.
Yeah, it's
Two
two
people in the band. Yeah.
And so that would stop the creative process. So when COVID happened, basically I was already in lockdown because I was isolated completely because I own a full studio. So I literally would wake up in the morning, have breakfast with my wife, go to the studio, come back, have lunch with my wife, go to the studio, have dinner with my wife, we watch something on TV. When she falls asleep, I'm in the studio. I was completely already quarantining. So the thing that changed for me was someone told me this is not going to stop. I was like, oh my God, for the first time ever, I don't have to stop. So I told Nick, I was like, you know what? The key nowadays is content. Content is king. If you don't have enough content to keep your audience entertained and interested, you're going to disappear. I don't care how big you are. Nowadays, you release an album. What is an album anymore? I mean, you release an album, it's gone in 2 months, 3 months. No one knows
Right.
about it.
Right.
So I told Nick, why don't we really sacrifice and let's do 20 full songs? And when I say 20 full songs, I'm not talking ideas. We wrote full, complete songs, mixed them at my studio. Now, then we took that and I went to Dave Grohl's 606 studio because it's always been a dream of mine to record on the Sound City board where all those amazing records were made. I was like, I want to do that. So I talked to, I met Lou, which is the guy that's in charge of Grohl's studio, his head engineer over there. And we became friends because of the Dodgers, because I'm a Dodgers nut. And I said, hey, I want to come in and record my band. And I sent him the new music. He loved it. I had him produce it because he knows that board. He knows that room. He's recorded hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of thousands of hours of music there. And so essentially we took, and this was a challenge, probably the biggest challenge of all, and why it's taken so long to finish these records. So we don't play to clicks. This is all live. This is old school. You turn on Pro Tools and it's like a tape machine. You don't look at it. I don't create music by blocks, moving blocks around. You play like you used to when you were 16 years old in a garage. Play it live. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Do it again. And so the challenge with that was I didn't want to redo all the songs from scratch. I wanted to capture at 606 was the guts of him and I playing together in that big room with that board.
And
he's
a drummer and a singer. Yeah. He's the lead singer. Yeah. And he's hit this. He sounds kind of like a Muse, Queen, like hybrid vocalist almost. But he's got grunge. He's got rasp, everything, all the range and everything. You guys should check it out if you haven't heard Cairo Knife Fight.
Let me get. I'm sure you're going to get to this, George. But you had these songs done in your studio, you're saying, and you were going to kind of retrack them with the live energy between the two of you in this other environment. Is that what we're getting to here?
Yes, because there's no duplicating that. There's no duplicating the nerves you have when you're in such a famous room, and the history that's in front of you. Look on that board. There's a picture of Grohl's setup from Sound City for the kaku to taku kutaku from the fucking Nirvana song. Yeah. I'm in that studio looking at that picture going, there's nothing can compete with that feeling. And what you're capturing is you're capturing a moment in time. And look, it doesn't matter how good your studio is at home. It doesn't matter how amazing it is. If you're not interacting with other human beings, you're not going to get that. If you're there by yourself, that's an art as well, but it's different. It's completely different. And I felt that I take advantage of this time. And here's the other thing that's amazing about the way I did this is that's more content. So we have the original sessions that are mixed,
Mhm.
we can release those as special versions later. Just keep your audience entertained. Hey, check it out. This is where this started before we went to 606, and it's what you're going to hear later on. And nothing, but what I was about to say was the challenge was, in order to play to that stuff correctly, I had to hire a Pro Tools expert to create a moving click that Nick could lock to, so that I wouldn't have to re-record all those enormous amounts of guitar parts that I did. All I wanted to capture was him and I playing live, but
and
not
you guys
mess
have
up.
a lot of time changes too. If I
Yeah,
remember right. Like
Yeah.
it's like a slice of a song and then another slice of a song, but it's all woven together. I've never heard anything like it. I'm telling you,
Well, let
it blew
me
my mind.
so, George. I mean, so I'm trying to get this together in my head. So you used some stuff from the home sessions, let's say, because you didn't want to redo all that stuff.
yeah.
So
There was
so what actually did you two do? Was it just like him on the drums and you on one guitar, or how did you get that vibe going?
well, the biggest challenge is the actual physical setup of the band. But it's
Okay.
5 amps, so essentially you have a phasing nightmare when it's in the same room.
Mhm.
So that's why you have to go to a bigger studio, because you have isolation rooms. And so each amp was in a separate isolation room. And then Nick was in the middle and I was in the control room. And we played along to the songs and we kept the best part. Some of the original stuff that we did in my studio was better than the stuff that we did in Grove's studio. And so then it was my job, as you know, I've been doing this a long time. I marry the two sessions.
Mhm, mhm.
I keep the best of both sides and marry them together to what I hear in my head.
Did you ever play through that board, Billy? The Neve at Sound City?
I believe so. Yeah, we did one Mr. Big record there, and maybe two. I can't remember, but I was there back in the day a little bit. Quite a legendary spot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. And you know what? And I hate to say this, but I made a big mistake while I was there. That's a dark board. It's actually dark. Like
Yeah.
it records for drums, amazing. Bass, amazing. Guitar, it's like it had a blanket over all the guitar
yeah.
parts.
Mhm.
And so I should have, because obviously there was an API board right next to it. And I asked Lou, was like, what do you use that for? And it's like, mostly Dave likes cutting guitars on that. And I didn't think about doing that. And so that became a whole nother challenge. I had to recut a lot of those parts to add the top end that I hear in my head. And so it was a blessing, and it was quite the learning experience.
You know, one of the things, Billy, you said you had you didn't really market yourself, but you had all these sessions come down for you. And I think one of the important things of the many things that both of you have said, but a lot of musicians just kind of gave up during COVID, or thought they could kind of use their career the way it was. I'm going to do one album a year or whatever. And I think what George said, it's like, yeah, today it is a different industry. And if you're not putting something out constantly, you're just missing it. So did you have time to work on your own stuff amidst all these sessions you had? Were you energized by all these sessions, or were you
Absolutely.
like, oh, come on, give me a break, I just want to sit and watch Netflix for a while?
No, I don't do much other than music. I don't have like any hobbies or things. I remember back in the rock magazine interviews, so what are your hobbies? And I go, bass and music.
Well, and eating delicious food. I've noticed.
Well, that's not so much a hobby as a
Yeah.
necessity. I was starved to death. But it's been great. We got together, myself, Mike Portnoy, and Richie Kotzen. We laid down. We've done writing sessions in LA for about a week at a time. Got some great stuff down. We're getting the finals of it done. So we got that whole record. I did a record with a gentleman that was on our comments section a little while ago named John Statham.
Yeah, John. He has a show, doesn't he, in Nashville? I think he interviews people too.
I don't recall that. Maybe he does, but he writes these story songs that are, and I'm not a country guy, but they're a little countrified, and so I just let him be in charge of that part of it. But we just made a wonderful record with him for that. It was cool. I'd always have my phone with me, and I'll be fooling around, and I put it on selfie video. And record the part. Okay, here's the part. But when the chorus comes, and I've explained, I got thousands of pieces there that'll eventually be assembled into something. Who knows what? But I haven't really seen it as a. Sadly, it's a negative for a lot of people that have been adversely affected by the pandemic. My heart goes out to them. But it's been this is the longest I've been home since the '70s. So, but nice to be traveling.
When you mentioned you've done a lot of all kinds of music, what was the most surprising thing that dropped in your lap that either challenged you or kind of juiced you up?
I had a track from a young lady in Japan. Her name is Mari Hamada, and she is kind of a prog, but she dresses in a gown and is quite kind of operatic, wonderful. And she sent me some challenging stuff before, and this time. I promised myself the next time she sends me something, I got to check it out first before I say yes. But in the interim, between then and between now, she was kind enough to fly me into Japan to do her 30-year anniversary show, and it compensated me for it, put me in a nice hotel. I got to play 2 or 3 songs with her, and that was it. So it was very kind of her to do that. So I thought, next one's okay, sure, I'll do it. I didn't listen to it first. The first song came in. It was cool, a little challenging. The next one came in. Might be the most difficult thing I ever played in my life. It was somebody wrote this MIDI bass line all on a 6-string bass. So all the notes are the super fast transitions all in this area of the neck, which is the hardest thing. And so the other day I took the original MIDI line on the left channel and put my bass in on the right channel. It's been long since done and turned in, and she's happy with it. But just to hear man versus machine, how close I was to it. And wow, it was a bear. And I worked on that for about 4 days, and then it took us about 2 days to record it because it was a bear. Unbelievable lines that somebody sequenced, and they thought, well, he'll be able to do it. Oh. Open foot, insert mouth, but. So there's been some challenging things like that. And once in a while, guitar player will send me anything, and he wants me to double what he does. Some guys, they make it real plain what it is. Some guys just kind of they didn't really hit it like they should have, so kind of had to guess where to go. But it's been an adventure, to say the least.
Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour. Actually, we're 3 minutes over the top of the hour. But we like to keep these to around an hour out of respect for everyone's time. But I want to give everybody a last closing remarks. So let's go ahead and start with George, and then we'll give Billy the last word, and Mike can take us home. So George, tell us a little bit about where people can find out about you and anything else you got to say.
Well, the Cairo Knife Fight stuff, we're finalizing negotiations of how we're going to release it. But my thoughts on it is pretty much a song a month or bi-monthly, and so we'll release for probably 2 years straight, and that is all found at CairoKnifeFight.com. Cairo, like Egypt, knife fight, and you can find anything on me from there, or it's a wonderful world. You can just Google it.
I'll just say this: I don't have any stickers on my car except for a Cairo Knife Fight sticker.
Thank you, man.
That should tell you at least it's pretty darn good. So just check it out.
We're really excited about it. Can't wait for the world to hear it.
Well, even the video you did a while back, that super sexy one, because I'm a film nut too, and it was amazing how not only musically did you go for it, but really found that mood and weren't afraid I don't know whether you wrote that or directed it or whatever, but man, talk about a melding of 2 powerhouse ideas. That was awesome.
The crazy thing is that video has 71 million views.
Wow.
And that is all organic. We didn't do anything to get that. It's the biggest talking point right now for Cairo because, of course, labels are like, this is crazy. In a weekend, you guys just did another million.
Mhm.
And you're not doing anything for this. You don't have no music out. This is an anomaly. And they're trying to figure out how to. And I think it's exactly what you said, Michael. It's just a melding of two worlds that you just don't really see every now and then. And to answer your question, it's a team that we have in New Zealand still that's done every video. And check this out. How crazy is this? That's funded by the country. They give you grants to do these music videos and to do your band.
You know, it's so funny because my wife has become obsessed with these, because now on Acorn you can get all these New Zealand, TV shows. And I mean, it's so funny because even just a relationship show or a buddy, series or something, I watch these things with her and I go, they are weird there. It's just weird how, it's a whole different plane of interacting with people and what they care about and don't care about. I mean, it's crazy.
It's always been one of my favorite countries. When people ask me, you've been to everywhere, what's your top two? And I'm like, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm kind of inspired to maybe check it out someday when I can still travel.
The rules are very difficult. I've been traveling a lot lately, and it is not fun. Man, I can't tell you how hard it is to have a mask on for 12 hours on a long flight. I understand it. It's necessary. I don't want anyone to get sick or me, but it's a challenge.
Before I let you guys go, the weird something I heard that was very disturbing as far as how live music survives or doesn't survive. I like to see if this is crap or whether you guys have experienced this. Is I talked to someone with King Crimson. They could not get insurance for their tour. So if they had to cancel a show, they had to write a check. I said, I don't get this.
Wow.
I talked to Trey Cool with Green Day, who they did that Hella Mega tour, which kind of popped the cherry of the stadium tours. I said, does this make sense to you? They couldn't get insurance for that tour. So if they canceled a stadium gig, again, they'd have to write the check for the stadium. And I don't see how an artist, unless you're well funded, could even hope to tour without insurance. I mean, and no one's really talking about this in the mainstream, but I think this more than COVID could tank this whole industry. Billy, have you heard about this or?
No, but I know it's a ball of confusion and catastrophic situations everywhere. For band members, but for crew and lighting and sound and those poor guys, man, it's been a tough run, man.
And I guess George, for the P's, I mean, those are big productions. If you guys can't get insurance, that's probably a nail biter.
What's going on is that we still have yet to do an actual tour. What's happening right now is you're getting different investors that are paying for these shows to happen. And so they're covering the whole burden of all of what you're talking about. But let me just say one other thing. So a really close friend of mine works for AG, and he was just on the J. Cole tour. And I think it was like a, above 10 truck tour. It's one of those big tours. The biggest problem he had that no one is talking about, and he was talking to me about it, that's usually, in order to close that show, to tear down that stage, you usually hire around 60 working hands outside of your crew. His crew was 25. You need about 60 people to efficiently tear down that stage. He couldn't hire them. No one's working because people are still on unemployment. They're like, why am I going to push a box? I'm at home watching Netflix. So he couldn't hire the crew. He was driving the forklift himself. Wow. And that is really affecting the industry. It's that people are having to do things. I think personally, it's very exciting because it's going back to the way it used to be. So keep it simple, make it about the music, forget about all this big production, because right now you really can't do it. unless you're funding it yourself. And a lot of people are. I mean, when you're selling out 20, 30,000 seats, you can afford to do that. But even then, you're not making the same amount of money that you used to because it's costing so much more. And you know what it's creating? What we have here in Vegas, an enormous amount of residencies.
Yeah.
It's kind of great to be able to see all this music here, but
Well,
that's because those people can't afford to tour.
Yeah, and I'm not drawing any lines at all, but I mean for Billy and Winery Dogs, I mean they could go out like it's Humble Pie 1969. For the Black Eyed Peas, I'm not sure would everybody in the band go, well, if we can't have our production, maybe we don't want to do it, or would they say, yeah, we'll go out like Humble Pie?
No, we do.
Okay.
We do. Yeah, we keep it simple. Look, there's only in the Peas, there's only me and a drummer, and we're just playing along to the machine because we're very good at that. So my best friend has a click track in my ear, and I'm playing bass and guitar like I do in Cairo Knife Fight. In that gig, I'm using that little pickup called a Little Thunder, and it sends out a bass signal to a bass amp, and I'm playing guitar, and that's the only thing they're willing to pay for, because it's too expensive to have 4 other musicians. With the P's, they just keep it really simple, and it's just me and a drummer and tracks, and that's it. And the only reason I'm there is because I've been there so long that Will is comfortable when he starts talking to people. I'm the guy behind him playing the chords, and I know what he wants to hear, and that's his comfort zone.
Yeah, well, as Matt said, we probably got to wind this up, and Billy needs to take us out. And I just want to thank you both for being here, and also just for there's so much, young kids are so starstruck, and I mean, it's great to have people like both of you who aren't afraid to talk about, it's really tough right now, and this is why, and it's not just like you're saying, hey kid, I made it, you're not gonna, so just go away. It's almost like we need to have another show to deal with the tendrils of what you've talked about, but I appreciate you've been very specific about it, both of you, about the challenges, very specific about how the COVID area has changed music making for us all. And I just appreciate that for all the listeners out there that, I'm not saying don't get involved in music because it's a great life, but you need to go in with both eyes open.
Absolutely.
Okay, Billy, it's all you.
Oh my God.
Oh, play Shy Boy before you leave. No, I'm kidding.
All right. That'll be the 10,000th time. Well, thanks for having me on with George, incidentally, Matt and Michael, because it was a pleasure to spend some time and listen to his wisdom as well. And
thank you, Billy. It means a lot coming from you.
Oh, absolutely, my brother. And new Winery Dogs is in the works, and the new Talus record is done.
What?
Ah.
Got a new Talus record.
Talus. Wow.
We the original version 2 Talus, we refer to it, from back in 1984, 85. And a gentleman friend of ours up in Toronto mixed it. And sadly, we lost our singer soon after he finished his vocal tracks, Phil Narrow. And so we really want to make this record about his legacy. But that'll be coming. And you understand, putting records out now with the COVID and the supply chain problems, it's a gargantuan, long task. So we're going as fast as we can. That'll be coming along.
Do you have any estimated dates on either of those releases?
No, I wish I did.
Okay.
Sorry, but they're coming. The Talus record's done. It's mixed and mastered. So we're the cover's being done now by Hugh Syme. He actually was a friend of Phil Narrow's, and he's done quite a famous guy, and he's pitched in to do a cover, and again for Phil's legacy. And I'll be doing a Christmas show in Buffalo, New York on December 15th with full horn section and a lot of Christmas carols.
Awesome.
Yeah. Right on. Well, thanks you guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody for being on the show. I wanted to, what did I want to say? I lost my thought. Oh, well.
That's getting old, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's like, here, let me get a drink of coffee.
How many times you run into a room? What did I come in here for again?
Well, I think I was going to say something an attempt at being witty, and then I forgot it. It's all cool. But well, Billy, thank you so much for being on the show. Episode number 2, Kingdom of Rock.
Beautiful.
And George,
he's a veteran.
thanks. Oh, I know what I was going to say. 2 things. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, so for all of you veterans out there, I know Mike and I been in the military. And Billy's got family that's been in the military. George, do you have any military background?
I don't. I
don't think we ever talked about that. But tomorrow's Veterans Day, so happy Veterans Day for all of the people that have served. And I wanted to tell Billy that if you're ever in Vegas, you got 2 people to hang out with and party in Vegas that live in Vegas. So we'll give you the red carpet treatment.
I'd love to.
Absolutely.
Great, man.
Yeah. Oh, and thanks again, Billy, for staying up so late. I know you're 3 hours ahead of us, right?
It's my pleasure. Oh, and incidentally, the Vegas thing, I think I'm doing the Steve Vai camp. I think that's in Vegas.
Oh, at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, you mean?
No, it's the Steve Vai.
Oh, his camp. Yeah.
So when I'm there, I'll keep that in mind and track you
Yeah,
guys.
dude, you'll
be sorry that I did.
We have a lot. Well, okay, we know where all the good food is. We know where all the good venues are, and we can get on the list and go see live shows and do all kinds of cool things. So we'll make it worth your time.
Sounds like a blast.
All right.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you, guys.
Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. And we're here every week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern time, live stream. And some of these get turned into podcasts. So go check us out on all your local podcast networks, Spotify, Google, Apple, what have you. And Matt Gibson, Michael Melenda, George Pajon, Billy Sheehan, Kingdom of Rock out.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll see you guys soon. Stay healthy.